King Slime is a production of iHeart Podcasts and Heirloom Media.
I was in Gwinnett County in 1988 at the age of 15, and I was bused to Parkview High School. I was the only black guy there, and I was bused there to be the first African-American running back for the school, but I didn't know how to fit in. The streets are always calling to you. I think our parents don't understand the tune of the streets. It's always calling 24 hours. It's accepted, whether you rich, poor, black, white, fat, skinny, whatever gender you're from. The streets will say, I welcome you. I desired that friendship, that comfort. And it led me to being around a lot of older guys. And I found that sense of welcoming in the streets. At that time, it was the degree of exposure to gangs not as lucid as it is now. At that time, you just had GDs and vice lords running around. You had down by law moving in certain places in Atlanta. And so when I say the streets, it's a mixture of that. The gangs was not as formulated as they are now. I found that sense of welcoming in the streets, just going out to the streets and started committing crimes, started real small. It always starts real small. And getting involved in stealing cars and that sense of, to tell the truth, of power. It's hard when you feel powerless, but then the streets give you this sense of power. And at that age, you don't realize this power is like a battery. It's going to run out after a while. And you don't understand it's going to run out, so you just keep going and going and going. And it snowball. And then people expect a 15-year-old to stop the ball that's gotten bigger and bigger and bigger, to stand in front of it and just stop. I tried, and it rolled me over. So just running with some older guys, we end up robbing the store. Nobody was supposed to get hurt. But in the heat of things moving around and going into the store, and somebody coming to the store, and people running, and they were going so fast, the gunfire. What just happened? What just happened? Because that's not like we going in to go, we're going to shoot these people, go shoot this clerk, I'm going to shoot this person. It didn't happen like that. It didn't happen like that. But when you put a gun in your hand, you have to accept what happens at the end of that. You know, the clerk lost their life. And it was like the darkest moment in my life. But at that time, to be honest, I didn't feel anything. Remorse and sadness, and I became so much part of the street. I was just as hard as the road out there.
I'm George Cheedy.
And I'm Christina Lee.
This is King Slime,
the prosecution of Young Thug and YSL.
I'm Andrew Morse. I'm the president and publisher of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Wanted to welcome everybody here tonight, and mostly wanted to
It's spring 2023, and I'm at The Gathering Spot, a networking and co-working club founded in Atlanta. Think a country club without a golf course next to Georgia Tech. Tonight's panel, sponsored by the Atlanta Journal-Constitution newspaper, is called Celebrating Atlanta's Black Culture. There's a black and white mural of Andre 3000 and Big Boy, of Outkast, in the promo image. And the venue is buzzing because there are free whiskey cocktails. And the night's guest of honor is Atlanta's mayor, Andre Dickens. Dickens won a runoff election against Felicia Moore in 2021, in no small part because he grabbed the hip-hop crowd. Years prior, Moore had introduced an ordinance that would have required that all music studios be built at least 500 feet away from residential areas, disregarding the existence of home studios altogether. Rap artist T.I. would remember this ordinance as he rallied his Instagram followers against Moore, claiming that she lost sight of the culture. Dickens, on the other hand, is firmly part of the hip-hop generation. As he tells the panel crowd, he and Andre 3000 were part of a crew that would swap clothes so that none of them would repeat outfits to school.
So when Andre 3000, Andre Benjamin, He was in 6th grade at Sutton. I was in 7th grade at Southwest. We were in a group of folks that we would trade clothes so that we looked like we had more clothes. I had a Fila jogging suit. Andre had either like a Lacoste Sportif or a Adidas jogging suit. And like Tony had like a polo and a da-da-da. So we would get together on Sunday and I'd be like, here's mine, here's yours, here's yours. So that week I was fresh. I'm like, man, you got a new jogging suit every week. Now he wasn't a rapper at that time. He was just a dude.
Of course, the mayor of Atlanta would have grown up with Andre 3000. We're at a moment in the city's history where that just makes sense. But it's still worth considering how we got here.
Atlanta's dual histories as a Black Mecca and music capital have been intertwined since 1974, the year Dickens was born. Dr. Maurice Hobson is a historian and professor of Africana Studies at Georgia State University. He's consulted and appeared in documentaries about Atlanta's 1906 race massacre and Atlanta rap star Lil Baby.
The Atlanta sound is based on the soul and funk that kind of comes into the city in the 1970s. And that's a result of Maynard Jackson and the creation of the Bureau of Cultural Affairs and Bunny Jackson Ransom, his first wife, who brings soul and funk after her and Maynard divorce, and Cameo and Isaac Hayes and Curtis Mayfield and Brick, and like all these people kind of come to Atlanta. That's the sound.
Maynard Jackson, Atlanta's first Black mayor, founded the Bureau of Cultural Affairs as the city's first institution to support local artists and art organizations. Talent shows sprung up at schools across the city in hopes of keeping kids off the streets. In 1975, Maynard's then-wife, Bunny Jackson, founded the PR firm First Class Incorporated to support local bands that gave rise to Atlanta as a music city.
Decades later, Antonio L.A. Reid and Kenneth Babyface Edmonds continued to build off that history when they founded LaFace Records. They chose to establish LaFace Records in Atlanta because it felt like a city full of dreamers, according to Reid. He noted the city's history of Black leadership, upwardly mobile Black community, and civil rights legacy. The first acts that LaFace Records worked with in town were future R&B stars, Bobby Brown, Whitney Houston. But then L.A. Reid took a meeting with two 17-year-old aspiring rappers, Andre 3000 and Big Boy. Outkast went on to become one of the only rap groups to ever sell over 10 million units, going diamond instead of just gold or platinum. The LaFace Records offices used to be in Buckhead. Lifelong Atlanta resident Bain Joyner took notice.
The labels would be in New York, and then you see the Capitol Records building in Los Angeles, so Atlanta didn't have any of that. And around 9th, 10th grade, I found out that the LaFace office was in the Blue Cross Blue Shield building in Buckhead. And it's like, oh yeah, like it's here for real. I want to go work for L.A. Reid. And I'm the same age as Criss Cross.
This realization is crucial to what Joyner has been saying for years now. If you've ever heard someone say that Atlanta influences everything, it's because of BAME. That's the name of his creative agency. Through that agency, he's helped create a handy t-shirt slogan and worked with local officials to update the city's image for this hip-hop generation.
Atlanta has King and Coca-Cola and Outkast, starting, I guess, with the Diamond album and Hey I. So this black melting pot of civic, corporate commerce, and culture, those three reasons are how we justify the statement. Because we knew if somebody wasn't from Atlanta, we would have to justify it.
And that very idea of Atlanta influencing everything is what has made Beam an appropriate spokesman for the city.
And why Joyner is sharing the stage with Mayor Andre Dickens at the gathering spot tonight.
We're all really fortunate to be living in this city at this time. As our friend Bame Joyner, who's here, and I'll embarrass him, but as he likes to say, Atlanta influences everything. That has never been more true than it is today. And the thriving, dynamic, influential Black culture in this city is one of the reasons, undeniably, why Atlanta influences everything.
When Dickens takes the stage, he daps at Bame before he sits down center stage. And he's happy to wax nostalgic about his school days, being friends with Andre 3000, and seeing civil rights leaders in person as a child.
Black men wore suits and they were on TV talking about good things for us. And I said, I want to be them.
But for some of the tougher questions regarding the current state of Atlanta, in particular about Young Thug, the YSL indictment, and the national coverage that the city was seeing as a result, Mayor Dickens actually had nothing to say.
Recently, we've seen the city on the national stage for a range of things, from politics to Cop City to the YSL trial. I mean, you name it. How do you think that some of these events are going to shape the culture of the city? How will it change?
Dickens had already rested his mic on a table next to him to take a sip of water, and he doesn't pick it back up to answer. Instead, he motions toward Bame and smiles widely, as if cueing him to speak on his behalf, which Bame does, reflecting on how the nation is influencing Atlanta's Black culture, whether that is Cop City.
When I heard about stuff happening in the trees, I hit my homeboy Antonio. That's his neighborhood. Bruh, you in the trees? He said, nah, bruh, I'm at the crib. So he checked around, I found out wasn't nobody I grew up with in the trees. I'm like, well, who do you folk in the trees?
Or Young Thug.
Young Thug got Grammys, yo, don't forget. Like, very creative people that are floundering. So the talent is in Atlanta. YSL is the talent. But you see how he calling on Kevin Lyles and these other, those are execs. You see what I'm saying? The execs of the industry are in New York. If Theroux and Doug and Mays breed more execs, not just talent, but the business of how this works, then we can start to control our culture. And controlling our culture in Atlanta means we help Black people control their culture in America. But with no control, right, you just got folks running around here doing anything. The business, not the vibe, not the feeling, not the dancing, but how the money is made. The brands are run by white boys who smoke weed. What I'm saying is the business of how things work in entertainment and culture, they're still either run by white people or Black people like a Kevin Lyles and who they're trying to call on the witness stand that aren't from here. And he's going to fight for the music industry. That man ain't never really kicked it on Cleveland Avenue and Road Martyr. And I like Kevin Lyles. I actually wanted to be Kevin Lyles. So that's all I'm saying. The YSL trial is also a lack of creative business infrastructure that does not exist in this city.
And with that, the panel portion of the night's event was over.
I didn't realize the magnitude of what had happened to us. We ended up going to court. I didn't know what was going on. I was only being tried as an adult, but I really wasn't an adult. At that time, my capacity to understand the magnitude, I don't even think I was a child. I don't know. I know I done wrong. And I always think I'm gonna go home. We denied everything going to court. We just denied everything is what we're supposed to do. Because courts are won in people's heads. Not in, it's in your head that you don't won this court, and that what was in my head. That I'm gonna beat this. And the judge gave us a life sentence at the age of 15. The judge said, get this filth out of my courtroom. You'll never see the light of day. You'll never see the light of day.
We chatted with Bame Joyner a few days after that AJC panel to break down what he had said that night. To start, and to borrow the title from his first mixtape series, Young Thug came from nothing. More specifically, he came from Cleveland Avenue, where Bame Joyner's mom would sometimes be assigned as a public sector social worker.
It's a rough, lower income, but blue collar area, and with not much to look at. And I think that's the key, wasn't even no murals or nothing, it's just a rough, low income area.
Young Thug's search for opportunity as an aspiring artist might have begun at home with family connections. Chuck C., who you met in episode 2, remembers how Young Thug's father, Jeffrey Williams Sr., taught the importance of showmanship to Chuck's rap group, the Throwback Boys.
We would just get on stage and rap, and he was like, no, you got to have a show. You got to have showmanship. The showmanship was taught to us by Big Jeff.
But Young Thug's road to fame from Cleveland Avenue came after LaFace Records relocated to Los Angeles in the year 2000, which doesn't make coming from nothing any easier. Recent numbers are hard to come by. The pandemic scrambled our sense of what's going on in Atlanta's economy. But in the years leading up to the pandemic, Atlanta leaders relied on a set of studies that showed that a kid born into poverty has only a 1 in 25 chance of reaching an income in the top quintile, which is about $150,000 a year today. But 2 out of 3 times, the best outcome is a working-class $15 an hour job. That's before accounting for the things that might drag someone back, like a criminal record. A national study that's been running regularly for 30 years shows that a black person with a clean criminal record is less likely to be called into a job interview than a white person with the same resume and a recent felony conviction. Regular jobs treat young black men with a criminal conviction as almost unemployable, not just here, but everywhere in America. In other words, Young Thug didn't just come from nothing. He was, at least statistically, destined for nothing, which is what makes his rise to fame and wealth so much more impressive.
Here's Bame.
I was like, okay, yeah, like this is someone who gets it, especially understanding Cleveland Avenue, that area, and Atlanta, and still not having music industry real infrastructure. I don't know where the hand up came from, you know, that allowed him to get to the next level. He just kind of did it.
This lack of support may not seem out of the ordinary for most places, but we're talking about Atlanta, a city that is now a hip-hop capital despite almost zero incentives from the state of Georgia, and a city now regarded as a Hollywood of the South almost entirely because of incentives from the state of Georgia.
There was a film tax specifically created to pull money in, but there was nothing ever created for hip-hop.
In the world of rap, Atlanta may be where talent is born. It's a city where artists overwhelmingly connect and get creative. From 2001 to 2018, Fulton County, which includes Atlanta, saw its music-related businesses, recording studios, music festivals, and the like, generate almost $1.7 billion. Those same businesses hired at 6 times the rate as the rest of Fulton County's economy. But New York and Los Angeles are still where those same artists conduct business. It's where labels sign checks and cut deals with future stars. This dynamic has frustrated Bame for as long as I've known him.
If you influence everything, then you shouldn't be number one in income inequality. That's why I hate the shirt sometimes, because it translates to you cool, but you broke.
But concerning the YSL trial specifically, Bame also worries about how Atlanta's influence gets wielded by people outside the city. He sees that influence operating outside the city's control and taking advantage of artists who intrigue critics and music listeners with outlaw sensibilities, like Young Thug. As he said during the AJC event,
controlling our culture in Atlanta means we help black people control their culture in America. But with no control, right, you just got folks running around here doing anything.
When you turn 17 in the state of Georgia, you go straight to prison. You just go from juvenile to prison. I turned 17 too fast and ended up going to Alto State Prison, which was the worst prison in the state of Georgia at that time. My biggest exposure to gangs was inside of the prison systems. After 10 years being in there, then we started seeing these young boys coming in that were from the same neighborhoods, but warring with each other because they're from different gangs. Seeing how they can call somebody from the outside. My big homie told me I need to take care of this. And and they'll stab somebody because somebody on the outside said stab somebody, and catch more time in prison and be cool with it. Be okay with it. One of the scariest things of my time in that place was I'd done about 15 years at that time. And the young guys coming in and they're saying to each other, how much time you got? Man, I just got 6. Man, I got you 8. Oh, how much time you get? Major gave me 10. I'm straight though. Go down there, pump my weights. And all these young men, none of them was older than 19. And they was talking about time as if it was seconds. And then they looked at me and said, well, how much time you got? I just snapped on everybody. Because they don't realize, I just done 15. The screams, the noise, the sounds never stop. It doesn't stop at night. And you all think it's okay. It's not okay. One day, it's not okay. One day, it's not okay. You've given up your life in this environment to live in a cage while everybody else around you live on the outside.
A kid who knows my reporting confronted me on a MARTA train a few weeks ago. "You're that police-ass reporter on the Young Thug case," he said. He wasn't happy with me. There are entire subreddits full of people who are not happy with me. I was a rap music fan when I started reporting on this trial, and I still am. But I am no supporter of the rap music industry, if ever I was. Not all of it, of course. Just the part that is exploiting the pain and poverty of Atlanta and other cities for profit. Hip-hop is worth about $3 billion a year in recorded music sales, according to the industry tracker Trapital. Take Spotify's top 200 performing rap artists. Half their revenue comes from the U.S. South. Maybe a third of that is Atlanta. Millions in sales. Yet only a third of top-line revenue ends up with an artist at all. About 2/3 of that money goes to record labels and publishing companies, collaborators, and billionaire music executives in Los Angeles, New York, and elsewhere. Warner Music is owned by the Ukrainian-American businessman Leonard Blavatnik. Warner Music also purchased 300 Entertainment, the label that launched Young Stoner Life Records in 2021.
Ahead of Young Thug's first bond hearing in summer 2022, his defense team submitted over a dozen character letters testifying on the artist's behalf. One of those letters, from artist manager Ben Izaki, says that Young Thug once outfitted a friend who was being released from prison. That's despite how said friend tried to have him murdered out of jealousy. Another letter, from 300 Entertainment president Jeff Ogunlesi, remembers when Kanye West personally invited Young Thug to record with him. But when his sisters weren't a part of that invitation, Young Thug declined, so that he wouldn't, quote, hurt his siblings' feelings. As these character witnesses stress the countless hours that Young Thug spends in the studio and mentors his signees, prosecutors point to other possible motivations for why all these music execs would not want Young Thug flagged as a flight risk. Here's New York Times reporter Joe Coscarelli.
You have Kevin Liles, who's the CEO of 300 and who presumably made many, many millions of dollars on that deal, testifying on Young Thug's behalf and arguing for him to be granted bail, saying that he stands behind him personally and professionally, that he's only ever seen him as a motivator and a positive member of the community. And then you have the DA's office saying everyone here who's testifying about how great of a guy Young Thug is has a financial interest in him. So, it's quite complicated.
Trapital has noted that 65% of the rap music audience is white. As much as black people claim rap broadly as its cultural product, gangster rap as a black cultural product is sold primarily to white people. And apparently a subset of the audience is willing to pay money for authentic gangsters rapping about shooting each other. Here's Coscarelli.
I have not seen the music industry really held to account for the way they do or do not engage in the seriousness and the literalness of this music and their artists. There's always another rapper from tough circumstances, rapping about tough stuff for a label to sign. And I think a lot of people wonder where the consequences are for the people who are really making money off of this stuff. 300 Entertainment, the home of YSL, sold for $400 million, largely on the backs of Young Thug's music, along with others. So I don't believe corporations are inclined to change unless the economics change, unless the business changes, unless there are financial incentives to do so. I just don't think we've seen that yet. If the audience stops listening to street rap, then maybe the labels will sign something else. But, there seems to still be that interest if you look at the charts, on Spotify or Apple Music or listen to the radio.
For all the sublime creative power of the art of rap, the market is uplifting street violence in the music and the way minstrel shows were patronized when ragtime music was popular. The same elements are there. Black people behaving with comically loose morality, engaging in wild acts of violence, abusing women, drinking and drug use, and extolling the virtues of luxury brands to show off their apparent wealth. They even wore chains. Minstrel shows made money because white people found it entertaining, reinforcing their own sense of racial superiority. We frown upon blackface these days, so we hire actual black people for the job now. The more authentic to the role, the better. Sometimes audiences will accept a fake in the way wrestling fans accept staged kayfabe moves in the ring. But plainly, they prefer the real thing.
To survive prison, you really have to dehumanize yourself. All emotions, because emotions will get you killed. I did all those years, and I remember looking at the person in the mirror, and it scared me. Literally, the person who looked back at me scared me. Because the person who looked back at me wasn't human. He wasn't. It's a person who didn't care what happened to you or anybody else around you. I knew right then and there, if I'm ever going to make home or become a better person, the person staring at me gotta die. I realized that I can't fight everybody, but I will outwork you, I will outthink you in this environment. The warden would come into the dormitory and say, hey, I want everybody to move your pants from the top shelf and put them in the bottom shelf when I get back tomorrow. And guys were literally want to go to the hole about that. Ready to fight. I'm not doing nothing. I don't care what he said. I'm not doing nothing. What are you going to do, Hakeem? I'm going to move my pants from the top shelf to the bottom shelf because they're not my pants. This is not my locker box. This is not my bed. I'm just only temporary borrowing these things until I go home. And that mindset created hope for me. I got up before they told me to get up. I went to sleep before they told me to went to sleep. The wardens used to ship me around from institution to institution to say, I need you to stop the gangs from fighting each other. I'll get you home. And the moment I was able to get their camps under control, they put me on a bus. And that didn't happen 1 time, 2 times, 3 times. It happened over 10 times. They'll put me on the bus and ship me to another camp.
Looking back at those days of the Throwback Boys off Cleveland Avenue in the early 2000s, Chuck C can't help but wonder if the influence he had on Young Thug, demonstrating the opportunities available to him by way of music, was positive.
I'm one of the person he's listening to, right? So when I hear about what happened to YFN Lucia's mother's house, right, then I think back on the song where I say, disrespect, that'll get your ass kicked, shoot up your mama house and break your little brother's neck. So when I think about me saying that rap and him listening to that rap and then somebody's mother's house gets shot up, you know, I feel a certain, you know what I'm saying, a certain way because these was the lyrics that we were saying and these were the people, Young Thug and his crew was the people that was listening to.
Let's take it outside, let's take it outside, let's take it outside.
And that's what I feel kind of responsible for, because we didn't set a good example. So, of course, the people up under us didn't have a good example to look at.
Kara Convery, who leads Georgia's gang prosecution unit at the Attorney General's office, concerns herself with how much more quickly such examples could spread today among an age group that seems to get younger and younger each year.
Like, as soon as you can throw up a sign, as soon as you can articulate an affiliation, a loyalty to, we've seen it and heard it. So young, single-digit ages, kids.
And among kids living in the social media age in the city's most vulnerable communities.
The promise of a lifestyle is the number one draw. It's the primary vehicle that's marketed through is social media now, when you can hold a device and see someone has access to not only success, but material success. You know, they've got stuff, they've got things, they've got jewelry, they've got shoes, they've got clothes you want, they have attention and celebrity. They've got this huge network of friends and influence. And I think for young people, particularly young people in communities that might not organically get exposed to that some other way, that lifestyle is more than attractive. I mean, it's incredibly compelling, and it's something that we as a not just law enforcement community, but really as a society have to decide we're going to come together and try to recruit in our own way, because it's the most impossible thing to come up against.
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Orenthal James Simpson, not guilty of the crime of murder in violation of Penal Code Section 187A, a felony upon Nicole Brown Simpson, a human being, as charged in count 1 of the information.
Chuck C. can remember when O.J. Simpson was acquitted for the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman.
We went outside. As soon as we heard it, we shot guns in the air. We went to the liquor store, bought a bunch, and we celebrated. You know, we felt like it was a win for all of us.
He thinks that Young Thug getting acquitted would also have people celebrating in the streets.
This is definitely the O.J. trial of this time right here. Every street person will feel like they won, right? Not just Young Thug. Every street person, every YSL member, every ABG member, every person that lives on Cleveland Avenue, everybody that lives on Jonesboro Road, everyone is going to feel like they won. It won't even be Young Thug beat the case. On the streets, it'll be we beat the case, right? This is what the people are going to feel like if he wins, or, you know, praying that he does.
Kara Convery couldn't disagree more.
People in communities that have been victimized in this way just want to feel seen and want to feel like they matter. So I choose to, maybe people will be celebrating in the streets. I don't think so, though. I think people get it.
She says that Atlanta's police chief, Darren Shearbaum, views the YSL indictment as a productive step forward to combat that influence. She remembers a recent training session where he boasted of the immediate aftermath.
One of the things he talked about is the effect on crime that we saw after the YSL indictment dropped, which was we saw crime numbers kind of dip down right after the publication of the indictment itself. But his big thing was an individual experience he had as just a human being walking through Cleveland into an apartment complex that had been just totally terrorized by YSL and the violence that came with them and their conflicts and stuff they had going on in that community. He walked into the community on foot, and a lady approached him and just said, you know, can I talk to you? I just want to thank you because it is the first sort of couple weeks of peace that I've had. And thank you for caring about this community, for caring about people like me that live here that are not in YSL.
Crime has indeed fallen. It's fallen off a cliff, though most notably east of where Cleveland Avenue is located. Oddly enough, crime has remained stubbornly high in Zone 3, which includes Cleveland Avenue. Those crime numbers also don't account for tensions that have boiled over inside Rice Street, the overcrowded Fulton County Jail, and the state prisons. Tensions that were displayed to horrifying effect in spring 2023 with a cell phone video that leaked from behind state prison walls. A warning, the audio from this video is graphic.
Shut up, nigga. Pussy ass nigga. Too much slime, nigga. Stop moving, bro, before I bust your ass now. Tonight you slime. Nigga, I can't get that shit up off your head. Stop crying, bitch. You ain't crying when you was slime, nigga.
The inmate holding the cell phone is pinning down another inmate who's been gagged and hogtied. He then takes a blade against the victim's skin as if to literally scrape the YSL tattoo inked on his arm. If hip-hop's social media is to be believed, then the assaulter is associated with YFN. Devin Franklin is the Movement Policy Counsel at the Southern Center for Human Rights. He's worried about the violent conditions that YSL defendants live under at state prisons and on Rice Street.
The men charged in this YSL case are still in a really uncomfortable place, crowded, and violence at the jail has been up. There are just shortages in staff with the Fulton County Sheriff's Department. They don't have enough people for the jail when it's not overcrowded. They really don't have enough staff to keep persons in custody safe who are currently there. And to add on to that fact, you have brought people back who are in prison. They were down the road at whatever state prison to come back to Fulton to face trials. And, when you're already serving a life sentence, you have a lot of violence. You have what we are being told are rival gangs in there. And they're under really inhumane circumstances. And I think it may lead towards people acting in really aggressive ways sometimes.
In an effort to keep the powder keg at Rice Street from exploding into all-out chaos, young thug has been held at Cobb County Jail. Cobb's not exactly the Ritz-Carlton. All of Atlanta's jails have issues with violence. But his move there does keep him somewhat isolated from his alleged YSL cohorts, and perhaps more importantly, his alleged YFN enemies, including YFN Lucci. In 2022, before the YSL indictment named YFN Lucci as a suspect and alleged rival gang member, Lucci had landed his own RICO charge. He's been in Rice Street since January 13th, 2021. No exceptions were made for him. And when the YSL trial began, the YFN trial was postponed, which means Lucci's been living in the bee's nest even longer. And, as we've mentioned before, says that he's been stabbed in 2 separate incidents by YSL defendants. But things would change dramatically for both the YFN and YSL cases because of another event.
The Fulton County Sheriff's Office says all defendants will be booked into the Rice Street Jail. Sheriff Pat Labatt has previously said those defendants will be treated like any other detainee and have a mugshot.
It's August 24th, 2023, and the roads leading to Rice Street are lined with spectators. At the Fulton County Jail itself, hordes of people stand behind barricades. Some are supporters, red MAGA hats, blue and red flags. A row wears T-shirts that say Blacks for Trump. And some are protesters. One dons a prisoner costume as if he came straight from Party City. Others are in full-body rat suits. But most of the people here are reporters.
So right now we have crews outside the Fulton County Jail to make sure you know what to expect today. Atlanta News First Rebecca Schramm begins our live team coverage near the jail's main entrance.
The sun is just starting to set, and lights from TV crews give the street an eerie green glow. Helicopters buzz overhead. It's carefully controlled chaos. An expected but unprecedented event. The end result of years of political and legal wrangling, broken faith, and growing discord. At this moment, all eyes are on Atlanta.
Outside of Atlanta's Fulton County Jail, heightened security as the sheriff braces for Donald Trump to surrender. Once he turns himself in, sheriff's deputies...
In anticipation, on Instagram, a club and restaurant called Sweet Food Lounge promoted its Welcome to Rice Street party. $200 bottles and free hookah for ladies.
Former President Donald Trump arrives by motorcade at approximately 7:30 p.m. He's ushered in through the Fulton County Jail, away from the hordes, shielded from reporters. He's in and out in less than 15 minutes. And just a few hours later, his mugshot will be on nearly every television in the country, perhaps the most famous image in the history of American democracy.
The mugshot
of the 45th President of the United States will go from tomorrow's newspapers into our history books, where the only presidential mugshot will live forever.
But a far less indelible image is captured outside of Rice Street that night. One that will make a few quiet circles on social media, but will mostly be swallowed in the tidal wave of Trump coverage. It's of an older Black man with a bald head and a thin sprout of facial hair on his chin. He's wearing a black t-shirt that reads "Free YSL" in huge all-caps block letters. In a similar font, on a black poster board sign that he holds, there's a message. It reads, "Free YSL. Trump and crew got a bond. Young Thug and YSL face the exact same charges, but no bond? Make justice fair. We deserve a fair fight too, Fonny." It's signed Jeffrey Williams Sr., Young Thug's dad.
Why did Donald Trump, who is accused of leading a violent insurrection to overthrow the nation's democracy, an insurrection that led to one death, countless injuries, $1.5 million in damages, and prison sentences, some decades long, for participants, get a $200,000 bond, one that cut his stay in the notorious Rice Street jail down to a 15-minute photo op? The court uses something called the Ayala factors to decide whether someone gets a bond. A judge considers a defendant's community ties, their employment status and history, whether they've run before or committed crimes while out on bond, and their past criminal record. A judge is also supposed to consider whether a defendant is likely to threaten witnesses, which with Trump is an open question. He's been warned by judges for doing just that in other trials. The difference between Donald Trump and Young Thug is that Trump is surrounded by Secret Service officers, cops, wherever he goes. I suppose that gets Trump the benefit of the doubt where Young Thug doesn't. Whether Trump's RICO indictment and subsequent spectacle will bog down the gears of justice for YSL is an open question, and one we won't know the answer to for a while. But a big, high-profile case that takes up an inordinate amount of the Fulton County Courthouse's resources can certainly have that effect. Just ask YFN Lucci.
There was a warden named Brad Hooks, and the institution was going into a riot all over the state of Georgia, and we was in Rogers State Prison, and he said, the commissioner wants to know, will this camp sit down in this riot? I told him, give me a week. And I gathered all of the gang members from the Crips, the Bloods, the Aryan Nation, all of them. And I told them to come and meet in the library. And I asked the warden to leave them alone. Let them bring their henchmen, their 2 bodyguards with them, like the good fellas. And they marched down the aisle with their chests out. Because I realized some people, if you give them a sense of power, even though they don't have any power, they'll respond to what you're telling them. And we sat at that round table, and they stood back with their henchmen behind them. And I explained to them, I've been here for 25 years. These bricks don't burn. I've been there, done that. You'll lose your phones, your drugs, your connections. Some of the females that y'all are sleeping with, that's all gonna be gone. We're gonna sit in the cell and eat sandwiches out of a sack for the next 6 months. I'm going to work. What y'all wanna do? And at that table, they decided, we all going to work, Keith. Keep the warden off of our backs. I said, that's all we gotta do. And Rogers didn't go into a riot. The warden, he wrote a letter to the parole board and said, this kid, if you send him home, I'll put my pension on the line that he'll never come back. He'll never come back.
In September 2022, LaShawn Thompson was found dehydrated, malnourished, and unresponsive in the jail's psychiatric wing.
The family of a man who died in the Fulton County Jail says he was eaten alive in his cell by bedbugs and insects.
He died in September after a 3-month stay at the jail. Photos provided by the family's lawyer show a jail cell in deplorable condition and the dead detainee covered in bugs.
His body was found covered in bites and sores from bedbugs and lice. conditions that yielded a Department of Justice investigation into the jail and a $4 million settlement with Thompson's family. Thompson is one of 22 people who have died inside the jail since 2022. 10 of those victims have died from January 2023 until this recording in early September alone. One of the latest was Samuel Lawrence, who, on August 22nd, handwrote a 12-page plea to officials seeking relief. Relief from a cell that didn't have running water, a working toilet, or a mattress to sleep on. Relief from hits and bruises to his ribcage, and from medical staff who said that if he continued suicide attempts, they would, quote, call drug court coordinators to interfere with me getting out. One of the last lines in his note was that he hoped to, quote, see some justice, peace, sanity.
Samuel Lawrence was not a guilty man. He was a man who stood accused of a crime, awaiting his day in court, in a place where presumed innocence is a luxury seemingly few are afforded these days. Our producer, Tommy Andres, asked Fonnie Willis about this during our interview.
So Atlanta jails are a pretty dangerous place these days. Several men who are charged in some of these high-profile cases are being held in jail for long periods of time without being convicted. I wonder what you think about that, sort of from your perch.
I think that we have a lot of violent offenders in the Fulton County Jail, and that's what I think.
Does it concern you at all that that unconvicted men's lives may be at risk?
Obviously, sitting here, I have to be concerned about the safety of people while they're in jail, because I think people are entitled to dignity and that they need to be in safe spaces, that they need to live in humane conditions. Quite frankly, I've been here a long time. That jail has been disgusting for a long time. I think that there's a real responsibility to build a jail to make sure that people live in humane conditions. So from that standpoint, am I concerned? Yes. Now, violent crime is down, right? That's the reality. You can't deal, my daddy say deal with reality or reality will deal with you. A lot of violent offenders are being held and being convicted and being sentenced down the road. And in terms of people that are convicted and held accountable, that I'm proud of.
When I came home, I created a job. I was a sentencing consultant. I made that job up. I literally made it up. Most lawyers grow up in neighborhoods that not like the defendants they're defending. And most people don't trust public offenders. I was the liaison between both of them to help the communication bridge work better. So I went from there and I got hired for the Department of Juvenile Justice. They literally changed the law so I can get hired because I still was a felon. I wrote a program called Step to Change. It was for young men who were tried as adults. How do you make that transition from child to adult in that environment? Nobody was teaching that. So we began to teach that, and we stopped the violence of teenagers being tried as adults. We stopped them wanting to kill each other, harm each other. And a friend of mine who works for the Public Defender's Office said, Madam Dave was looking for a speaker to come do a leadership training. So I came and I did a one-day event, and it was awesome. She called me, and at the end of the day, I think you can do more. What's it gonna take for you to come work for me? She's a go-getter like that. She just said, what are they paying you? She said, you're catching kids after they're convicted. I want you to catch them before they even come to me. Catch them before they even come to me. I want to put you at the front of the line, and that was like the God moment for me. This is the opportunity to stop them from going down that way.
Dr. Maurice Hobson remembers when he first heard about the charges against young Thug.
November 2021. Because it was the same day as the Braves that won the World Series.
That's because I had asked him whether he had heard of some of its defendants, including young Thug.
I meet with this person who has these resources.
He means me.
And they kind of like, listen, if you know anything about this crew, like, somebody's watching them, and if you just know, you might need to tell them that, like, they need to get it together.
Indeed, the professor had, since around 2014.
Young Thug got some banging ass beats and some shit talking to. I mean, you know, what really made me really stop and pay attention to Young Thug is him and Tip. If it ain't about the money, I was like, man, they talking some real shit up in this thing, man.
After our conversations, Dr. Hobson starts making phone calls.
So I leave the spot where I am, and I just go to I call a producer in the city, and I'm like, hey, would you happen to know Young Thug and him? And they were like, yeah. And I was like, well, I mean, I need to come see you because I just got a message I need to give you. So I was like, well, listen, when they say RICO, they already got somebody who's giving up information. And I listen, I'm not in the streets, but hell, I know that. I didn't, just because I'm not in the streets doesn't mean I don't understand what's going on here.
Dr. Hobson is author of the book, The Legend of the Black Mecca, Politics and Class in the Making of Modern Atlanta. Hobson traces the making of that legend all the way back to 1864, when, after Abraham Lincoln commissions General William Sherman to burn down Atlanta during the Civil War, newly freed slaves settled into the city that had burned to ashes.
Black people received equal protection and due process under the law before the passage of the 14th Amendment.
Hobson then explores the greater legacy of Atlanta's Black political leadership, that unbroken streak of Black mayors in the city, starting in 1974 with the city's first Black mayor, Maynard Jackson. But, he says, as that same political leadership led Atlanta's bid to host the 1996 Olympics, the city also threatened to shut out, if not physically displace, its underclass.
The world assumes that all Black people are a monolith. There's an educated elite. That's a particular tract. There was a merchant class, an entrepreneurial class. That's a different tract. Then you have the rise of a political class that marries some of this. And then you have the working class and poor who work. So there's tension that goes on here.
If it wasn't for the rap groups Outkast and Goody Mob specifically, the world might not have heard from Atlanta's working class at this time. Decades before you'd see Jermaine Dupri, Ludacris, and Killer Mike's face on that giant screen greeting visitors arriving at Hartsfield-Jackson Airport's domestic terminal, Outkast recorded an album interlude called Welcome to Atlanta, where the voice of a pilot points out to passengers how the Georgia Dome still flies the Confederate battle flag and how parts of Atlanta's South Side are home to the Red Dogs, as in the controversial crack-era police unit whose name stood for Run Every Drug Dealer Out of Georgia. Atlanta's hip-hop legacy has evolved since then, and Dr. Hobson confesses that he's critical of trap music specifically.
When we start talking about, like, trap and all that kind of stuff, like, I can't glorify that as if it's a way of life, but I do understand that it was a mechanism for some of these young Gen Xers to kind of get out of issues, get out of the streets. And so it's complicated for me. For people in Atlanta, off Bankhead and, off, what used to be Simpson Road, and then, kind of getting into Cleveland Avenue and whatnot, like they're not looking for some kind of self-righteous kind of person. They're looking for someone who understands them and recognizes that they need help. So that doesn't always come in the package of, well, I got to be a preacher or I got to be a teacher.
Without the music, without that recognition, the legend that Dr. Hobson has so carefully studied wouldn't live on, because the odds for a large portion of the Black population in Atlanta are grim.
I wrote this book, The Legend of the Black Mecca, Politics and Class in the Making of Modern Atlanta, and people often try to conflate the legend with the myth. There's a reason I named it the legend, and what I'm saying is that a myth is something fictitious. With every legend, there is truth. We have to figure out what's real and what isn't, but the one truth about Atlanta as a Black Mecca is the creative culture that comes out of here. I mean, like, people from all over the Black world have been able to come here and produce music and movies and content in particular ways. That is the true legacy of the Black Mecca.
It's hard to predict how the YSL trial will turn out, especially before a jury has been seated. But regardless of the verdict, this trial has already had an impact in Atlanta.
There's long been this disconnect between how the world views Atlanta's musical influence and how those who run the city actually acknowledge that influence. In 2018, Stacey Abrams' gubernatorial campaign got a catchy anthem, a remix of the song Win by J-Rock. J-Rock is from Los Angeles. When Atlanta hosted Super Bowl 53 in 2019, the leading halftime act was Maroon 5. Big Boy of Outkast played a mere supporting role. And in 2022, the Atlanta Falcons revealed its new theme song by Rotimi, an actor-singer known for his role in the TV show Power. Rotimi is from New Jersey. Bane Joyner doesn't see Atlanta hip-hop being any better represented in light of the trial. Not when the YSL trial is still pending, perhaps as a convenient excuse.
My guy at U.S. Bank in Elevon, they're running a small black business campaign out of Atlanta, and they say that they can't find artists without a rap sheet. So they land on Musiq Soulchild.
Musiq Soulchild, while a revered singer-songwriter, is from Philadelphia.
What you hear is everybody saying Atlanta is the home of hip-hop and all of this. But when it starts coming to corporate America, tapping that, they only know as much surface knowledge as they know. And so the Falcons said, T.I.'s in trouble. Man, there must not be anybody else. Now, J.I.D., huge fan of the Falcons. Earth Gang. So these acts, ain't nobody shooting up their bus. Earth Gang went to Mays High School, Southwest Atlanta, Ben Hill. And you still don't hear these acts from V103 to, dare I say, iHeartRadio. And because of the lack of infrastructure, there's no cultural liaison to guide brands to, whatever. No one knows what to do. So the YSL trial, people are using that as an excuse to not tap in any further.
When producer Done Deal and I chatted about the YSL indictment, he was looking to sign his own artists. When it comes to rap, Atlanta's own Gucci Mane has set a gold standard in town for discovering new talent. He's been called the city's best unofficial A&R for having discovered artists like Waka Flocka Flame. He's opened up his Brick Factory studio to artists like Migos and Young Thug himself early in his career, before he got his teeth fixed. For Done Deal, though, that standard doesn't necessarily hold today.
How does all of this affect that talent? Does it have any effect on that talent scouting ability? Is this something that you're considering as you're looking for potential talent?
Yeah, for sure. It makes me think about, look at Gucci. Like, I love Gucci to death. But 2 of your main artists get arrested. But how can you help yourself? How can you help them and help yourself in the situation? So I think you kind of have to look for somebody that doesn't put you in a situation that's bad. Like, it's getting a little bit out of hand.
This trial could also stand to change Atlanta hip-hop's relationship with its own city. Done Deal has chatted with other artists and producers since the YSL indictment arrived in 2022. Those people no longer want to work in Atlanta. Here's what he told me previously.
Their vibe is gone. They don't want to come to a studio and work knowing that their brothers got locked up out here.
Willie Prophet Stiggers, co-founder of the Black Music Action Coalition, can also remember a time when it was easier to connect with its music scene.
Most of the artists in Atlanta are leaving Atlanta and going to other places to live and or get creative. Look around. There's a time you can walk into a Publix or walk in anywhere and see Atlanta artists, moving around the streets as common as you see in other people. You don't see that as often today. When you throw something like a RICO case on someone where you only need conspiracy to be a part of that, it becomes very difficult for creatives to want to work with folks not knowing shit. If even being in the room or being on the record with you, that shit may indict my ass, you know what I'm saying?
But Prophet says that this phenomenon doesn't begin with the YSL indictment. He says Atlanta artists were spooked 1 month before the YSL indictment when Georgia Governor Brian Kemp signed a bill that allowed residents to carry a concealed handgun in public without a permit.
Now, you don't need a concealed carry's permit to move around Atlanta with guns anymore. So now any and everybody's just walking freely with pistols, with ARs, And when you're dealing with an already traumatized community that's lacking resources, that's lacking opportunity, and then you have an open carry policy, it's a recipe for disaster.
I got to tell you, this is an extremely interesting observation that you're giving us right now. That this question of violence in the street was starting to affect hip-hop in Atlanta even before Young Thug died.
Oh, 1,000%. This is why many in the culture is looking at this like, are you serious? Like, Atlanta has been tough out here. It's been tough. It's been dangerous.
In our interview with Fonnie Willis, the district attorney said this.
We cannot arrest our way and we cannot prosecute our way out of the gang problem. That's going to fail. So what we have to do is make sure that we take as many children away from thinking that this is sexy and this is attractive and leading them down different paths. And so you have to have a double-edged sword.
And true to her word, Madam DA has been sharpening the other edge of that sword.
We're on a program like this from the district attorney's office to reach program in the United States of America. That a district attorney has created a program to help change the minds of youth to think better, to think stronger for themselves, to become leaders inside of the school system during school hours.
At the start of the 2022-2023 school year, the Fulton County District Attorney's Office launched a novel program meant to slow down gang recruitment. A program led by a man with some particularly relevant experience and a uniquely tailored set of skills.
My name is Hakeem Woodard. I'm Director of Juvenile Services for the Fulton County District Attorney's Office.
Woodard oversees a weekly class that targets at-risk youth in Fulton County schools. He brings in detectives, investigators, and survivors of gang violence to speak. The program is called REACH.
Gangs' commodity is children. It's people. It's not money. They can have money, but eventually, what can you do with it? Other than just spending it buy things, but they need more members. The REACH program is to educate, elevate, and to stop that flow of kids into gangs, to say no.
But the most powerful mentor of that program may be Woodard himself.
What kind of opened the door for a lot of them was I told my story. That I've been there. I've been through the pain. I've been through the hurt. I've been through the neglect. I've been through left behind. I've been through left to die. I've been hits put on my head while I was in the prison. So I've been through all that.
Last year, 135 students went through the program at 6 different middle schools and high schools.
85% of our children in Atlanta, they're great kids, man. They are great kids, even in bad environments. They are good kids. They're fighting, trying to go to school, trying to make it right. And then there's a 10% of our population who are like moths. They are attracted to the light. They're attracted to it. Whatever the light is brighter, they're attracted to it. But then there's a 5% of our population who are the lights. We spend too much time locking up moths and not lights.
So, while there's a flashy trial happening on television, being picked over by journalists like us, there's a quieter fight happening down the road, now at 18 schools and counting, in hopes that there will be no more RICO trials indicting gang members in the years to come in Fulton County and potentially beyond.
There's a psychological war going on for our children, but the only thing majority of society see is the physical war. And we keep attacking this physical war. Lock them up, stop them, do this, train this. But the psychological war, we have yet to put boots on the ground to begin to fight that part of the war.
We asked Devin Franklin to imagine a scenario where Young Thug was acquitted of all charges. That possibility wouldn't necessarily bode well for the artists who could come after him.
I don't envision a world where the movers and shakers of the Georgia political and legal scene turn their gaze away from gang laws. I would be fearful that they've tried to find ways to make it easier to convict someone based on the fact that Thug was able to, quote unquote, beat the charges.
Hypothetically, those convictions could begin with a document that started circulating around social media shortly after Young Thug was indicted, rumored to be a comprehensive list of gangs on the Georgia Gang Unit's wanted list. That list raised eyebrows because YSL was on it, but so was 4PF, or Four Pockets Full, the name of the crew turned label founded by another Atlanta megastar, Lil Baby. Because there was no header to be seen, it was honestly impossible to tell whether the images of that document were real or fake. And so we decided to check, so to speak, with Kara Convery. She's hesitant at first.
Let me stick with the first, the non-controversial one. So I think YSL is a very real criminal enterprise. It operates in and around Atlanta. Is this I don't know, are you comfortable with me answering that?
She's asking one of her handlers seated to her left inside this conference room.
YSL is one example of that, but we've got all kinds of other things. I think you mentioned PDE, PFK, DFW, all kinds of groups like that.
Two of those groups share the names with record labels that boasted rising rap stars. PDE features Baby Drill. In summer of 2023, Baby Drill was featured in a music video by Lotto and Cardi B. 2 months later, the DA's office indicted 8 alleged PDE gang members.
PFK stands for Play for Keeps. The crew turned label boasted one of Lil Baby's closest collaborators, the rapper Lil Marlo, before he was shot and killed in 2020.
I mean, I could go on.
Keep going. I'm challenging you here. Go on, do it.
But Convery protests, saying that any alleged gang that she is aware of could easily rebrand itself. So we press her on specific examples.
Is 4PF on y'all's radar?
When you say, so 4PF is an active hybrid in the city, I would say absolutely.
Slaughter Gang?
Yes.
Slaughter Gang is the name of both a record label and entertainment company by 21 Savage, the same artist whose arrest by ICE inspired the Rap Act to limit the use of lyrics as criminal evidence. Meanwhile, the DA's office in 21's native DeKalb County has alleged that Cordarius Dorsey, one of the YSL defendants, is also affiliated with Slaughter Gang. I saw this social media freak out of, oh my God, they're gonna go after Lil Baby, or something like that.
Right.
Or name your rapper. Like, there was this whole moment where there was a who's next conversation. Like, is that still legitimate? Like, or should we be looking, should rappers be looking around like, am I coming, are they coming for me?
So it's not illegal to be in a gang, but if you are meaningfully affiliated with a gang and you are doing criminal acts to facilitate those objectives, yes, regardless of who you are.
The question of whether Young Thug will be found innocent or guilty is not one for us to speculate about. That's for the jury to decide. Our job has been to examine the social, economic, and cultural forces swirling around this trial and to help understand its impact, regardless of the verdict. But one of the things we've discovered is that even when the verdict is reached, an end might not be reached.
Credible informants who wish to remain anonymous tell us that Fulton County isn't the only entity that's been investigating YSL. Almost immediately after Donovan Peanut Thomas was gunned down outside of A&M Barbershop, the FBI and other federal agencies formed a task force gathering information on the alleged street war between YSL and YFN all on its own. That task force's name, Operation Planters. Consider that Kenneth Copeland, Lil Woody, who was arrested in 2021 on a gun charge, basically fell off the face of the earth after that arrest. The state charges were dropped. He was plainly on the hook for a federal case, but there's nothing visible in the federal record. Perhaps the Justice Department was merciful. But it's also possible that Copeland's charges were filed under seal to protect a federal witness. The feds have 7 years of evidence. and they're watching this trial as closely as anyone.
Normally, here's where we'd say, next time on King Slime. But after this episode, we'll be taking a bit of a break to let the YSL trial unfold. While the number of defendants have dwindled from 28 to just 7, and while jury selection began all the way back in January 2023, not a single juror has actually been seated. What's more, as we tape this episode, prosecutors have doubled their witness list and only recently turned in 300,000 documents that the defense must review to prepare their arguments. All of which is to say, we still don't know when opening statements will actually take place. So, to make sure you don't miss a new episode when we start up again, hit subscribe or follow on your podcast app of choice. King Slime is a production of iHeart Podcasts and Heirloom Media.
It's written and produced by George Cheedy, Christina Lee, and Tommy Andres.
Mixing, sound design, and original music by Evan Tyre and Taylor Chacoin.
The executive producer and editor is Tommy Andres.
Fact-checking by Kaylin Lynch.
Our theme music is by Done Deal.
Special thanks to Carl Cadle, Tyler Klang, Jack O'Brien, Nancy Stoltz, and Will Pearson.
And to the Atlanta news outlets 11 Alive, WSB-TV, Atlanta News First, and Fox 5.
For more shows from iHeart Podcasts, visit the iHeart Radio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.